recently began reading this book, Neurodiversity-Affirming Psychotherapy, Clinical Pathways to Autistic Mental Health by Ruth M. Strunz. And I'm about halfway through it now. But I got to page 66, which is, I believe, part of chapter 4. Yeah, chapter 4. And in the subsection of co-regulation across neurotypes, she talks about attachment theory. And it says here, an important point requires highlighting here because this is often the moment when a very large elephant attempts to enter the room. Bruno Bettelheim's 1967 erroneous hypothesis of autism as an outcome of relational trauma in childhood had widespread negative impacts. Bettelheim was a survivor of the Nazi concentration camps, and this hypothesis revealed the distortion of his diagnostic lens by his own childhood trauma. Consequently, even today, strident resistance arises in response to any discussion that includes autism and attachment in the same sentence, making it an unnecessarily difficult and arguably a neglected field of study. So there's a lot of negativity around the thought that parental care and attachment struggles lead to autism. However, there is a little bit of truth in that. For those of you who are familiar with the psychological field of study, Harry Harlow had rhesus monkeys, and he would put them in a cage, and there were two mothers. One was a wire mother with food, and then the other was a cloth mother. Consistently, the monkeys preferred the cloth mothers. They would go to the wire mother to take the food, but then would immediately return to the cloth mother for comfort. And consistently, they found attachment problems in the monkeys. This eventually led to research theories by John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth, the strange situation experiment.
After conducting extensive observations of parents and children at home, a student of Bowlby's, Mary Ainsworth, devised such a procedure called the strange situation, which places the child under some stress. It has become the most widely used, standardized way to assess the quality of a child's attachment to their caregiver. Here the researchers are recording how 14-month-old Lisa responds in this attractive but unfamiliar setting. How will she react to a stranger? What will happen when her mother leaves the room? And when she returns? It's Lisa's behavior when her mother returns, what psychologists call the reunion, that they are particularly interested in.
Most importantly is to look for the type of balance that a child strikes between an attachment need and, on the other hand, to explore the play material.
Once Lisa has settled down to play, a stranger enters the room and sits in the chair reading a magazine.
Lisa, where's the bow? Where's the bow?
After a couple of minutes, the stranger attempts to interact with Lisa. Soon after, Lisbeth gets a cue to leave the room. The stranger tries to comfort Lisa, but in vain. Lisbeth comes back into the room, and the camera records how Lisa reacts. Now the first part of the procedure is over, and Lisbeth settles Lisa down again. The stranger leaves them alone together. And soon after, Lisbeth goes too. Lisa is on her own. Her distress is plain to see. Once again, the efforts of the stranger to console Lisa are to no avail. But Lisbeth manages to calm her almost at once, and shortly afterwards the observation ends. Lisa showed outward signs of what's called secure attachment.
Determining how the child would react was basically how Ainsworth developed the stages of attachment. Secure, avoidant, I have them written on the board back here, anxious, and reactive. This eventually led to a diagnosis called reactive attachment disorder. I like to consider reactive attachment disorder a sort of artificial autism. It's because the child isn't actually born with the autistic traits, the genetics of autism, but they still experience, because of the early attachment traumas, they still end up developing the autistic traits. And generally, this develops between the ages of birth and 3 years old. So it can be very difficult distinguishing between reactive attachment disorder and autism, because generally they become noticeable around the same times. But similarly, we have something we can compare that to. If we look at the differences between psychopaths and sociopaths, a psychopath is born, whereas a sociopath is created. Similarly, an autistic child is born, whereas a child with reactive attachment disorder is created for similar reasons due to trauma. When it comes to a sociopath, it's generally developed, created by attachment traumas as well, head trauma, specifically in the frontal lobe, a traumatic event, such as the case of Dexter Morgan from the series Dexter. And that's not to say that autistics and individuals who have reactive attachment disorder are psychopaths or sociopaths. It's just a equivalent comparison, because one is born, the other is created. We really need to do a lot more research into the study of attachment and autism, because autistic children are also able to develop reactive attachment disorder. It's rare because it's difficult to determine if the child is autistic or if the child developed reactive attachment disorder, and to determine both would be next to impossible. But it is possible to have a child with both. We just aren't there in our research to be able to separate the two. So generally speaking, they do get diagnosed with one or the other. I'm not sure of any cases really where there has been a diagnosis of both, but I'm sure that there have been some cases. So with that being said, I'm going to bring this video to an end. I'm preparing my next lecture video now. It's going to involve where autism comes from. How is it created? I'm going to touch on topics such as vaccines, such as parenting style, such as genetics, all that stuff. And again, I will have references that you guys can follow up with. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Also, I'm going to be doing some roundtable discussions with other autistics and other people with developmental or neurological disabilities. So stay tuned for that. And I do have more interviews on the way. I just have to get them scheduled. If you want to check out some of the interviews I've got, I interviewed Michelle Hammer from Schizophrenic NYC. It's on the channel. I also interviewed one of my classmates who's the mother of an autistic child, and they're also Dominican, which there is a huge lack of research in autism and the Hispanic culture. I've also interviewed another individual on the schizophrenia spectrum from Ireland, and I interviewed Sarah, a TikTok influencer who's ADHD. I have more to come. You can check out those interviews on the channel. They have all agreed to come back and join for roundtable discussions. So I'm looking forward to that. And I really want to interview more autistic individuals from other cultures, whether it be Hispanic, Asian, When I say Asian, I mean Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, whatever the case may be. Indian, African American, African, Australian, Russian. It's wide open. I don't just want to focus on where research has focused thus far on Caucasian middle class males. I want to look at more more autistic populations. And maybe these interviews will help research along the way. Maybe they will help others receive a diagnosis. Who knows? But I've been Shannon. Take care, everyone.